Coming up on Chasing Natty, we're dipping back into Dynasty talk as myself and special guest Josh Chevalier from Fantasy Points dive into the best supplemental players to take in your CFF Dynasty drafts, as well as how to balance taking freshmen versus supplemental players in those drafts. In addition, we have to talk about Jordan Addison's transfer to USC. All this and more coming right after this.
Zappy looking to Jared Stearns, who makes the catch and scores.
What a burst! Trayvon Henderson, as advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful drive to your work on this wonderful, wonderful Monday morning. Hope you all are staying safe. I know there's supposed to be some storms coming in across the entire country throughout this week, so everybody stay safe with all of those. But even still, we're back with another great episode of Chasing Natty. We're dipping back into some of the Dynasty talk. Again, the topics on the show are going to kind of be a little bit more varied as we get into the summer because there's not that singular thing that everybody's talking about, like spring practices, fall practices, stuff like that. So we're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit. And today we're going to be doing, like I said, a little bit more Dynasty talk. We're going to be talking about supplemental players. And for those of you who may not know what even I'm talking about, these are players who are not freshmen, but are likely not owned in your dynasty leagues. These are guys that are still on the waivers, but if you're in a dynasty league where you cannot have made any kind of moves throughout the offseason, these are players who've been just kind of sitting there, and you realize some of these guys start to gain a little bit of value as the season goes on, as starting lineups start kind of getting set. You start seeing people come in from FCS, people come in from the JUCO. We'll talk about some of those guys today. But with me today, we have one of probably the smartest guys that I've ever seen play CFF and CFF Dynasty, and that's Mr. Josh Chevalier. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jared. I'm so honored that you would even consider having me on this podcast. So looking forward to just chopping it up for an hour or so about CFF, and we'll see where this goes, huh?
Yeah, like I said, we got a lot of great stuff to talk about here today. But before we get started with anything else, you guys know my spiel. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, comment right down there below. Let me know in your dynasty leagues if there is a top player, like maybe you don't want to tell me, but even like because you don't want your teammates to find out who you're targeting. But like, let me know who you think are the best players available in your dynasty league. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but again, it's so varied on who might be available in what leagues. But just let me know who you are most excited about maybe taking in those leagues going forward. And then if you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure you're following us wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, maybe you're listening on Spotify as well. Leave the reviews if you can. I always love seeing those, and especially the written ones on Apple Podcasts. Those always warm my heart just a little bit. And then if you haven't followed me on Twitter or Josh, I don't know what you're doing. Make sure you go follow us there. I am CFF_Jared. You can find Josh at CFF Guys. His is very simple. Gotta love it. You can find him very easily. And then, as always, we are part of the Campus to Canton podcast family. Myself, Nate Marquise, Brandon Sanders, and Chris Moxley, we make up the team there, the CFF team over at Campus to Canton. We have podcast articles, rankings, CFF ADP, new tools coming out for you guys. We have the CFF guide coming out later this summer. We're very excited to bring that to you guys as well. The draft predictor tool, I kind of went on my spiel about that last week. Go check that out if you're a member of Campus to Canton. It is, I'd say, probably one of the more interesting tools to be put out this year. Definitely can help you out in terms of determining value in your drafts and when to reach on a player and when not to. And then, of course, there are plenty of other awesome podcasts and shows from the Campus to Canton family. On Mondays, you have us, Chasing Natty, with myself and whoever I happen to bring on that week. This week is Mr. Josh. That's a great little smile, sir. And then on Tuesdays, you have Campus Life with Austin Nace and Colin Decker. That is the college side of the flagship Campus to Canton podcast. Wednesdays, you have Devi Debate live streamed on YouTube with Felix Sharp, Matt Bruning, Austin Nace, and Chris Moxley. Thursdays, you have the Canton Bound podcast with Austin Nace and Colin Decker. That is the NFL side of the Campus to Canton podcast. And then you also have the official with Alfred Fernandez, Matt Powell, and David Nipple on YouTube. That is a recruiting analytics show. They're trying to build models over there, trying to predict which of these high school players are going to do well, not only in college, but also all the way to the NFL. And then on Fridays, you have the Future Freshman podcast with Brandon Sanders on podcast and YouTube forums. And if you are a CFF Dynasty player listening to this podcast, stop what you're doing and go listen to that podcast as soon as you can, because that is the best way to get to know a lot of these guys coming into college this year and to know whether or not they could produce for you right away. And I especially am going to plug this last week's episode where myself, Brandon, and Mitch Hart came on and we did a CFF Dynasty freshman-only mock draft. One of the best shows I've ever done, in my opinion, and it is absolutely worth your time. Great stuff there. So, Josh, let's say we get into the deeper stuff of here, but we'll go ahead and start with, as always, some transfer portal news. And there's really only one name we got to talk about here. Like, all the others are minuscule compared to this. We got Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of Pitt, going to USC, the former Biletnikoff winner here. Josh, what is the impact of this? Like, what are we expecting both on the Pitt side of things and on the USC side of things?
Yeah, I mean, on the Pitt side, oh man, I was already concerned with Frank Canetti coming in from Boston College, and I'm not a huge Kadon Slovis fan. So the whole thing was I was scared for Addison, what his value is going to be this year. And man, I think this just skyrockets his value, of course, right? I mean, I think we've seen Oklahoma wide receivers produce year in, year out with Lincoln Riley. And then even before that at ECU, when he was over there with Hardy and Zay Jones and those guys back in the day. So, I mean, you know that Lincoln Riley is going to produce wide receivers, and Addison's just a perfect fit to come in. I think all of us were a little worried about Mario Williams and like what he was going to do in that system, whether he was going to be the wide receiver one we had hoped. And so Jordan Addison comes in. He's a perfect wide receiver one, obviously, as the Biletnikoff Award winner. And I think, obviously, it maybe bump his value a little bit. I mean, he's already going first, second round. But for Caleb Williams, I do think there was a little bit of nervousness, at least from my end. Like, the guy could have ended up QB1 and he could have busted. And I think this really ensures that he's not going to bust because he's going to have Jordan Addison as that security blanket. And they have great depth there in that wide receiver core. So I love this for Caleb Williams, and I really, really like it for Addison as well. So I like it.
I like it from a football perspective. I'm a little bit more concerned now with CFF. C2C, I'm not worried at all. Jordan Addison is going to be a star wide receiver in the NFL. Right. But CFF-wise, I'm a little concerned here, mostly because, again, we're just getting at Pittsburgh, he was the guy. At USC now, we're looking at him sharing the field with Mario Williams, Gary Bryant, as like the main trio there. Yeah. Now, granted, they're going to have to throw the ball 45 times a game because that defense is awful and they're constantly going to be in high-scoring games. So maybe it's not going to matter at the end of the day. Maybe Addison's still going to get his fill. I could totally see that system being able to put up two different CFF wide receivers this year. So you mentioned that his value goes up a little bit for you here. He was before this, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 5 and about an ADP of 15.9 in the mock drafts that I have been doing. So that puts him right there at the middle of the second round. I thought I had 0 shares of Addison in any of those leagues because I thought he was going too high as the Pitt. I'm kind of thinking that with this move, his value starts to make a little bit more sense. If you really believe that he is going to be the wide receiver 1 at USC, again, I still haven't decided whether or not I think Addison or Mario Williams would be the guy. Because again, Mario Williams and Caleb Williams, they have the Williams to Williams connection. They clearly have some chemistry already. So I would say I haven't fully formed my opinion on this situation here. Now, what do we think about back at Pitt? Kanata Mumfield is the one that is the most intriguing to me there. But again, I'm with you. I don't like Kedon Slovis. I don't like the offensive coordinator from Boston College kind of taking over that system. It's a very big step down, in my opinion, from Mark Whipple last year. So Kanata Mumfield, like I saw somebody who was like, "Oh, does this mean Kanata Mumfield has what Addison's value was?" I'm like, absolutely not, absolutely not. Kanata is I'd say a great pickup in like the wide receiver 40, 45 range. Pick him up on your bench. Don't try to rely on him. He might still produce. Maybe Keaton does better than what I'm expecting, but again, this was all net benefit to USC 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's going to be one of those things. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, like you said, between him and Mario Williams. I mean, we're really going to figure out who Mario Williams is with Addison coming in. Because if he competes with them for targets, like, man, like that guy's got a great future. But right now, I think that's a little bit up in the air, and we'll see. And I love Mario Williams, so don't get me wrong. Like, I think the kid's great. So
yeah, Mario Williams
it'll be fun to watch.
I think if Addison still goes in the second round, Mario Williams is still going to be the value to me because, again, in my mock drafts, he's being taken as wide receiver 40 on ADP.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
I think I'd rather have Mario Williams at wide receiver 40 than reach for Addison as wide receiver 5.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is a little tricky there. And yeah, we can get deeper into this another time. But in that second round, I mean, there's a lot of like Xavier Worthy's going pretty high. Yeah. And there's some guys that like, I think it's like, man, you got JSN, obviously, Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then I like A.T. Perry a lot. Mm-hmm. And, but then I think you get in like after that, and it's really like, man, there's some guys that have question marks around that wide receiver too. Like how good, and we'll talk about them later, but how good is Isaiah Neyor going to be? You know, exactly. You got, Josh Downs, like, are they actually going to move him around and not allow teams to just bracket them like they did the last half of the season last year?
I think we all hope they do.
Right. And they did in the spring game. So I think there's a bunch of question marks there with all of those wide receivers. So,
100%.
Yeah.
I'm going to run through a list of just kind of additional transfers of interest here, mostly for you guys who are listening to just know that this happened. And if you want to, you can go look into it a little bit deeper. We're not going to dive too deep into it. Although, Josh, if you hear any of these that really strike your fancy, we can talk about it for just a few minutes. So, wide receiver Matt Landers transfers from Toledo to Arkansas. Caleb Chapman, wide receiver out of Texas A&M, transfers to Oregon. Kamaro Edmonds, former 4-star running back out of UNC, is transferring to East Carolina. Peter Costelli, quarterback out of Utah, is transferring to Troy. LV Bunkley Shelton is transferring from Arizona State to Oklahoma. Elijah Badger, another wide receiver out of Arizona State, is transferring to Florida. Cody Jackson is a wide receiver out of Oklahoma, is transferring to Houston. And then Quincy Patterson, a quarterback out of North Dakota State, is transferring to Temple. So, Josh, do any of those kind of really tickle your fancy in terms of like possible guys you could be targeting in CFF this year?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Nothing this year. Maybe more dynasty-wise, like a Peter Costelli, who I know the C2C guys are really high on. I think he had a pretty good 100-meter time for a quarterback, and transferred out from Utah and here to Troy. And so when big P5 guys like that transfer out, they got a lot of talent. Like you just got to like on the back end, and like what we're talking about here, right? In a dynasty draft, like your 14th, 15th round, most of your guys aren't targeting Troy quarterbacks.
Exactly.
So he's a good guy that, like, again, dual threats, kind of, we call him Konami Code over at Fantasy Points, Konami Code quarterbacks. Yeah, they rule the day, in my opinion, in college fantasy. So he's a guy I'd consider. The rest of them, I think we should have a funeral for their dynasty value. And also the other question is, who's left at Arizona State to catch balls? Because like this is just getting really sad at this point. Because between these two and Ricky Pearsall, like, man, it's so sad.
I just realized it's not Elijah Badger. It's Ricky Pearsall went to Florida. I knew something felt off about that. Ricky Pearsall went from Arizona State to Florida. Elijah Badger is still in the portal, I believe.
Okay, I was about to say, like, but still, you get the point, right?
That's why I want nothing to do with Arizona State over the next couple of, at least until they figure some things out. I remember I was talking to Mitch. He drafted Tevin White.
Tevin White.
I was like, I don't want any part of that system right now until they figure their crap out.
I think you are a very wise man, Jared.
The other one that kind of piqued my interest, and we talked about it a little bit because it broke on the show last week, but Matt Landers from Toledo, Arkansas. As a Georgia fan, we had Matt Landers in 2019, and that was by far the worst year of our offense, and we had to rely on Matt Landers as our X receiver. And let's just say we do not have a great relationship with Matt Landers. He transferred out and he went to Toledo. And I was like, okay, that's probably the last we hear of him because I really just don't think he's that good of a receiver. But then near the end of the year, he started kind of picking it up a little bit. And I was like, this might work out at Toledo. And then all of a sudden he enters the portal and he's going to Arkansas, where Sam Pittman, I imagine there's probably a good relationship there from when Sam Pittman was on the offensive staff at Georgia. Do we think this might be like some kind of signal that Jaden Hazelwood might not be, like some people kind of believe that he is the kind of heir apparent to Treylon Burks in that X position there at Arkansas? Do we think that maybe this is like, maybe not Landers is taking that over, but it's just a sign that they don't like what they have? What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely could be. I was never a big Hazelwood guy to begin with, so I've always been hesitant. So I definitely think you should be careful. In general, it makes you wonder, they move, oh my gosh, backup quarterback, Malik Hornsby.
Yes.
Yeah, they move him to wide receiver, kind of the weird stuff they're doing with him. It just makes you wonder, like, do they trust any of their wide receivers that they have? And I really like Katron Jackson. And then obviously they got Sestania coming in, Isaiah Sestania coming in. But so it just seems like they're just trying to throw spaghetti against a wall and see what sticks. I don't know. Like I'm staying away from all of that.
Just
I just don't think
Jefferson and call it a day, y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they got talent.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it seems like it. So somebody's going to hit. I don't think it's Landers though. Like he got really bad advice to go to Arkansas and probably be a fourth wide receiver on that squad versus being the number one at Toledo.
Maybe some NIL played into it. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just looking. I've been getting sniped on them in best balls lately. So I'm, because I was all about Matt Landers at Toledo.
No, again, he seemed like he had a good situation there set up at Toledo. That's why I was so shocked when he entered the portal again. And that's when I thought, I was like, okay, so maybe it's just not working out again, and we're just going to have to see him probably go to FCS. But then all of a sudden the crystal ball came in for the Razorbacks, and I was like, all right, that's kind of interesting. Didn't expect that. Yeah.
And you wonder what it does to me, at least, like Daquan Finn's value. Because he's lost Isaiah Winstead and now he's lost Landers. So he's got Devin Maddox coming back. And he's got some other guys. I mean, they recruit well for a G5 level, but those guys have not produced yet.
That's true. But again, it's I don't want to say this, like, I don't want to sound mean when I say this, but it's the MAC. Like, you don't need stud wide receivers to throw to in the MAC. Like, it's a very defensively challenged conference. There's going to be tons of points put up every single week. Daquan, if he can't get his receivers going, he can get his legs going. I think Daquan's going to be just fine even without this.
Yeah. It would be fun to see.
It would. All right, so we'll move on to our next segment here. It's more of just like a discussion-based part of this where I just had a question because I've actually had this proposed to me several times by people in my DMs and everything, and I try to give the best answer that I can. But I feel like this is a great time to talk about this. Again, plugging in that latest Future Freshman Pod episode, we talked about freshmen almost exclusively on this one. Here we're going to talk about supplemental players. But the question that have a lot of people kind of run into is that supplemental drafts often include supplemental players and freshman players together. Some leagues separate them, but a lot of leagues put them in there together. So the question here, Josh, is how do you balance when you're in a CFF Dynasty league, and this kind of goes for Campus to Canton leagues as well, I guess. How do you balance freshmen versus supplemental players when you are drafting in these drafts? Like, what's your kind of philosophy behind it?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's really all about value. So, and value to me is who's going to produce as soon as possible, and mainly with multiple years left. So, I mean, if you're competing for championships, you need 1 year, but really in your first, second round, like you need to have guys going to produce for the next 2-3 years. And so I think in 2 to 3 year blocks with this, and I mean, the guys that we're going to get into today, like if they're on your waiver wire, like you need to pick them because they're going to produce and they're going to produce right away. And most of them are going to produce for multiple years because either they're not eligible for the draft or they're just not good enough to go in 3 years versus 4. So that's what I would say. Like man, and also like I'm just not one to throw away money, so I'm always wanting to compete. Like I'm not that rich of a dude, so if I have any semblance to compete, but like I'll say like last year, where it was the COVID year, so a lot of places you didn't draft, and so I got Trevion Henderson with like pick 9 or 10, and he was a freshman. I usually don't go freshman super early like that, but I got him, and then I was able to flip him for Corral and John Rice Plumlee because I was trying to compete this year, that year, and then I went to the championship game in that league because I had Matt Corral, and so I think it's all about value and like because it's Dynasty, can you flip those guys? So it's really thinking about that too. So
yeah, see, to me, like again, you're the mindset, like, always compete. And for a lot of people, that is exactly what you want to do every single year. But if you're like me, like Josh is great at CFF Dynasty. I'm still learning a little bit. So I have one team that is just awful, like straight up awful. And I need to, it's going to be probably a 1 to 2 year rebuild. And so I think in a team like that, where you're kind of realizing that this year's probably not the year to compete, but build towards next year, that's when you probably lean a little bit more towards freshmen and kind of some younger players who may not start this year, but in their second year, if they're able to win the job at some of these places. Like we talked about it I keep plugging this freshman podcast, our future freshman podcast, but again, go listen to it. But we talked a lot about it, where if you stack up on some of these like Bama wide receivers as freshmen, you just kind of hold on to them for a year, and if they could win that job second year, you're going to love having the Bama, like starting wide receivers for Bama. You're going to love having the running back at Ohio State. You're going to love having Jadon Blue on your team for 1 year, and then when Bijan goes first round this year in the NFL draft, he's the next guy up. Like, yeah, it may suck for a year, but if you are thinking about that 2 years down the line, it could really help you out. Now, again, the caveat to that is, of course, there are no guarantees in college football whatsoever. You think that you have this can't miss prospect, and then all of a sudden you are looking at all of a sudden some guy transfers in when you thought he was going to get the job, and then all that great stuff. But again, to me, it's just evaluate your team and just make a plan for the next 1 to 2 years and base it off of what you're going to do. If you really think that there's no way you're going to be able to compete this year, take some risk on some younger guys in some proven systems and hope that they get the job, not in year 1, but in year 2. So that's kind of my philosophy on it for the most part.
Yeah, I like that. And I think one piece of advice I would give, and this is myself included, I think a lot of us think we know how to evaluate players better than we actually do.
True.
And so I'll go back and I'll review a lot of like old dynasty drafts just to see, okay, what's the hit rate? And it's like the first round is like a 25% hit rate. And it's the first round. It's like the people that we're most sure of. And so one, if you are insecure about your ability to evaluate, like first round picks have a lot of value in trades.
Yep.
So go get a guy that has 2-3 years left that you know is going to hit. Or like shameless plug, like, hey, go to Campus to Canton and like get a subscription for $50 a year or whatever. And it's like, because like that will help you because there's people that are doing this all the time. And I think something like Campus to Canton is probably going to make people more accurate in Dynasty. But like we didn't have Campus to Canton 3 years ago, right? And so I think it's like, be humble in your evaluation, assume that other people are smarter than you, and go get a subscription and then also like really evaluate in that way. And if it's not a sure thing, then go the supplemental route or like trade that pick, and you'll be surprised how much value those first picks have. So
no, I think that's actually a great piece of advice there. Again, if you are like questioning your ability to evaluate guys coming out of high school, go the supplemental route then. Because most often when you have guys who are values in supplementals, these aren't guys that we're hoping get the job in year 3. Honestly, for the most part, if guys don't have or aren't set up to the job in year 2, we're probably not viewing them as that likely of a value in CFF Dynasty in the first place. So go grab these guys who are set to have starting jobs. I'm looking at our list of 12 guys here we're going to talk about. Pretty much every single one of them we expect to have the starting job this year. That's the whole point of it. Don't draft a guy who's in year 2 that you're like, oh, he might win the job in year 3. Don't worry about that. That I guarantee you're going to have a lesser hit rate on that than if you just drafted freshmen in good systems.
Right.
So, let's go ahead and get into some of these supplemental guys then, Josh. I say we just hit the ground running on this. So let's go ahead and start off. Again, we're going to cover 12 today, kind of not simulating a first round, because I don't want you guys to think that if we say some guy is the second pick, that like that's the second pick you should take in a supplemental. We're just going to, me and Josh kind of pulled together like our list of players that we think are the most valuable in supplemental, and we just kind of picked 12 that we were both kind of consistently high on. I will say a quick caveat here. We are not going to talk about Quinn Ewers because in a lot of the leagues that we do, he was already available last year. But I do know there are several leagues that just said, hey, he reclassified too late. We're just going to do him in next year's freshman draft. And that's awesome. If he is available in your league, he is the 101. Don't even think about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. Easy conversation.
You have the 101 pick and Quinn Ewers is available. Just go for it. Alrighty. But let's talk about some of the players we are going to talk about here today. And we are going to talk about another quarterback here first. And that is Mr. Cameron Ward, quarterback out of Washington State. This past year at Incarnate Word, again, he's coming from the FCS. That is why he is available in every single league, unless for some reason you have already allowed him to be waiver wire picked. But last year, threw 590 times for 4,649 yards, 47 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He is now coming over to Washington State following his former head coach from Incarnate Word last year, Eric Morris, and who is a disciple of Leach, runs kind of his own version of the air raid. It's not quite the air raid because he is very outspoken about the fact that he does use tight ends and running backs. But they are going to throw a ton. Last year, the lowest amount of times that Ward threw the ball was 30 times. So if you got a base floor of 30 throws per game with your quarterback, you're going to love that.
Jared, did he average like 45 throws a game or something?
It was something crazy. I saw some games where he was in the 50s on this number of throws. Like it was absolutely nuts. And they got so many weapons at Washington State for him to play with. Dejon Stripling, I poo-pooed him a little bit last week, but he's still a great wide receiver for them to use. Renard Bell coming back from injury. Lincoln Victor has been making noise. And then also, for those of us with PTSD from last year, they also have Bob Farrell, who is a wide receiver from Incarnate Word, also following his former quarterback here to Washington State. They have so much for him to use. It's not like he is losing on the number of talent, the amount of talent he could use. This is they're in the Pac-12, and I'm known for poo-pooing on the Pac-12 defense. It's not like this isn't a system that can work that can't work in the Pac-12. To me, Chris Moxley has gone as far to say that this is this year's Bailey Zappi. I am not going that far, but I will say, given last year's stats with Cameron Ward, and if you reduce his 13 games down to 12 games in order to simulate the regular season, he would have been QB6 last year with the stats that he put up, and he is set to have, again, better system, or just better players around him to play around with. He's with his offensive coordinator. I think it's hard to miss on this one. I think, in my opinion, if I was doing a solely supplemental draft and Quinn Ewers was not there, this would be my 101. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I like Cameron Ward a lot. I mean, you and I were in a best ball a few weeks ago, and I just completely blanked that he was still on the board because I was doing stuff with my kiddos, and I picked like Adrian Martinez or something, and you picked a Cameron Ward right after me. Like, what the heck was I thinking? So I love that. I love the guy, and I love Incarnate Word's like an hour down the road from me here in Austin and so in San Antonio. So it's fun. And the only thing that I'm worried about is the comparison to Bailey Zappi, and innocent, because it's the narrative sets up right, like perfectly. But like we've seen at least 4 FCS QBs come into the Pac-12 over the last 10 years or so, and they haven't fared well. So you had Vernon Adams, I think it was back in like 2014. and my timeline might be off on that, but he played 10 games. He's the most successful. He had 2,600 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, and 147 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. But he finished second in the Walter Payton Award, which is the FCS Heisman, right?
Yes.
Cameron Ward was a finalist. Dakota Prukop comes in, and he played 6 games for Oregon. And he, 1,200 yards. He got usurped by Justin Herbert, which we know how that turned out for him. But he was a first-team FCS All-American. Gage Gubrid after that at Washington State, who never started a game. And then you had Kevin Thompson. Yeah, and you had Kevin Thompson with Washington that came in. He was FCS first-team All-American. So I just worry about him jumping 2 levels like that. Mm-hmm. From the FCS, and I consider G5, right, a lower level. I think Bailey Zappi, we really saw, right? He played 3 Conference USA teams last year, and he dominated, or 2 years ago. So we just saw, we had a sample size, we had all of that. We should have been picking him in the second round. We were picking him in the 7th there.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to throw water onto the Cameron Ward fire, but I also want people to be aware of hey, there is some risk in this. It's not not that he's, and I'm not saying he's going to flame out like these other guys. I think he's in the best situation, but he might not be QB6, right? He might, and it might take him a couple years to adjust. Cause this guy's a raw quarterback. He came from a running system in high school. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about a guy that's only a year or so into the system. Because of the COVID year, they played spring ball. Yeah. So he's got more games, but really 1 full year. So anyways, I would say, yeah, Cameron Ward, if he's there, you got to take him because the potential is just out of this world.
By the way, I meant to say at the beginning of each of these guys, Cameron Ward has 3 years of eligibility left. And there is some talk among the C2C circles that he could be if he does as well as we say, he could be a guy that goes to the NFL, but he also could be a guy that sticks around for all 3 of those years of eligibility.
That's right.
So if you are getting a guy with the potential to be a top 6 quarterback in CFF every single year in, year out, maybe it's not this year, but the next year if he gets another year under his belt, absolutely worth taking in my opinion. And Josh, you were talking about we want to be careful about the comparison to Bailey Zappi. You're right. But he's also not being taken where Bailey Zappi would have been this year. If Bailey Zappi returned for another year, he would be the number 1 pick overall, and nothing would be worried about. That's not where Cameron Ward's going in drafts. He's a QB 13, going around the beginning of the 5th round in most of our drafts. I think that's a safe enough, if you're a little backed off on him a little bit, 5th round, I think you're okay kind of taking the upside there.
Yeah, and it's definitely an upside play. But again, it's not without, also, his conference, I'm a JMU graduate, James Madison. And so I follow, not really. But I was a sports management major, so there you go. I'm not in grad school like you. But anyways, FCS, I'm a little bit familiar, and that conference is not very good. So there's just a lot there that I would say, man, he's going to step up. He's raw. Look, he's got tools, but and I would say this, if Cameron Ward if you draft him and he doesn't hit this year, hold on to him because I think he'll develop and he'll be good. But this year, it may be a learning curve. And I think we shouldn't be surprised by that if it happens.
Yeah, 100%. And just to kind of close this one off, we've been talking about it for a while, but at the end of the day, system. You give me a quarterback that is guaranteed to throw me 30 times a game. I don't care how bad he is. That is a good floor for me in CFF.
That's right.
Most days out of the week, even if for some reason, if he throws 30 times and somehow he gets less than 250 yards, the process wasn't wrong there. That is just bad crap luck. And sometimes that happens in CFF. But
that's right.
I'll take that any day of the week. Speaking of systems, let's talk about a guy who is probably the main beneficiary, we can all agree, of one of the greatest CFF systems we have seen in the last couple of years. We're going to talk about Mr. Myles Price, wide receiver out of Texas Tech. You got the Zach Kittley offense coming over to Texas Tech. I can tell you his stats from last year, 38 receptions, 523 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Nobody wants to hear that. They would rather hear the stats from Jared Stearns last year, the wide receiver 1 from this system, where he had 150 receptions, 1,902 yards, and 17 touchdowns. Jesus. Can Myles Price get to that level, Josh? What are we thinking here? He's my wide receiver 9 for like redraft this year, but he's got 3 years of eligibility. What are we kind of thinking here, man?
Yeah, and I mean, and maybe he's an NFL talent, right? Like my co-host with Fantasy Points on we got his tailgate live stream on Saturday mornings. Like he loves Myles Price, but like he's at least got 2 years left in the system.
Oh yeah,
and like Jared Stern, 150 catches, 188 targets. Like, I mean, it's just the volume is insane. And so if it's a PPR, like a full PPR league, like you may take him number 1.
Oh, I would
if he's available, right? Like, I think Myles Price, the sky's the limit. We don't even know who the wide receiver 2 is there, right? Like Myles Price is really the only one that we're certain about that's going to produce here. And again, not that they don't have other talented receivers, because they do. We're just not sure where they fall in the pecking order. But we know Myles Price is going to slot in there, and no pun intended. But I think this is going to be really fun to see. And I think if he's available, in your C2 or your C2C in your dynasty league, then I don't know. You got to take him if he's there.
And to me, some people might come back and say, like, well, doesn't the quarterback situation matter here? Tyler Shuck or Baron Borton? Once again, guys, it's the volume. It's like even if Shuck comes out, and I would say both of us might agree that Shuck is probably the lower ceiling out of the 2 quarterbacks, but I'd say Borton is the lower floor out of the 2. But even so, Shuck comes out. He doesn't have as high of a ceiling. If they're throwing 30 times a game like they were at Western Kentucky and everything, or 30, 35 times a game, guaranteed, it doesn't matter. Myles Price is probably going to earn at least 12, 13, 14 of those targets every single game. Volume's going to be absolutely insane for him. Probably more than that. I'm probably lowballing it.
Yeah. Probably 40 to 45 times a game they're going to be throwing it. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, again, if you missed on Myles Price, as far as I'm concerned, once again, your process wasn't wrong. You were going for a guy in a system with a ton of volume that clearly looks like the best wide receiver that they have going into this year. I say take Myles Price and don't look back.
Yeah,
if he is available.
Absolutely.
All righty, let's go ahead and move on to our third guy here. And we're going to go back to quarterback here. We're going to go Collin Schlee, quarterback out of Kent State. Last year, Dustin Crum finished as the QB 14. Collin Schlee was behind him. Collin Schlee got a little bit of work, 23 passes for 187 yards and a touchdown. Nothing too crazy, although he did flash on the ground, had 20 rushes for 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. So very clearly going to be another dual threat quarterback here at Kent State. Kent State has one of the best offenses in the country in terms of running plays per game. Josh, Schlee here has 3 years of eligibility. The NFL is not coming calling for any Kent State quarterback as far as we are concerned. Do you just take Collin Schlee as the Kent State quarterback, knowing you probably can't play him the first 4 games of every single year, but then you just suck up those MAC points later in the season, especially around playoff time? What do you think, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. And I think he could be in that QB1 conversation in the supplemental draft in that sense too, of like, man, like he's 6'3", 218 pounds. And I think we think about like Crum, those that saw him play, and they're like, oh, he's like big. He's like 6'1", 210.
Yep.
And Schlee's like bigger, stronger, faster, better athlete than Dustin Crum. So in that, like you said, like that's what he came in and did last year. He came in and ran, but he's got a good arm too. And I think there might be a little bit of learning curve, and we just hope that he doesn't get injured or killed in those first 4 games. But if he doesn't, go ahead.
I was gonna say Jesus, those first 4 games again: Georgia, Oklahoma, and Washington. And then I think they get a little reprieve in there, but like, yeah,
I think they'd be like Austin P State or something, Austin P. But yeah, it's funny. But I think you're absolutely right. Like this guy, his upside is massive. They throw down the field, but they also throw a lot of screen passes. And so it's not like the quarterbacks in this system don't have to have like a crazy complex. It's not a crazy complex system. They're throwing simple passes. Exactly. So I like Collin Schlee a lot.
Yeah, they have plenty of weapons for him to work with. They got 2 running backs that can catch out of the backfield, Marquez Cooper and Xavier Williams. Dante Cephas is being taken as the wide receiver. What is he being taken as? Wide receiver 14 in most of the drafts that I've been doing. Clearly this offense is not expected to skip a beat here. They're planning on taking over the MAC again. They'll probably be back in the MAC championship again next year because they can just outscore everybody in that conference. As far as I'm concerned, Schlee, if it's a solely supplemental draft, probably better be taken off in the first half of the first round. Yeah,
and how's that coach? How's Sean not gotten plucked by this point? He's such an incredible play caller.
Well, I think it's like you said, it's mostly simple stuff that just works in a conference like the MAC. So maybe that's part of it. But also, some people are just happy with where they're at. Maybe he likes just winning the MAC conference every single year.
Yeah.
He grew up as a child and saw Kent State playing and said, I am going to take them to so many MAC championships when I grow up. And when he went and told his parents that, they wondered where they went wrong.
Exactly. But more power to him. We're happy, right? We're happy that he's decided to stay.
Yeah, more power to him. And again, we've said it before, invest in systems. And the second most important rule of CFF, invest in the MAC. It is an investment. You can't play in the beginning of the year, but once they start playing each other, oh boy, it's so much fun.
Yeah. And Tuesday, Wednesday night games.
Exactly.
Doesn't get better.
Why wouldn't you love that? Let's go ahead and talk about another quarterback here, and that is quarterback Preston Stone, quarterback out of SMU, has 4 years of eligibility left. Didn't play a ton last year, only threw 7 passes for 24 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions or anything. Sitting behind Tanner Mordecai, but man, the buzz has been buzzing all of spring that Preston Stone has been pushing Mordecai for that starting job with new/returning head coach Rhett Lashley, because Lashley was the offensive coordinator before going to Miami, now coming back to SMU with Sonny Dykes moving on. Anyway, it kind of reset the quarterback competition, and Lashley's been very clear that this is a quarterback competition. And a lot of us, including myself at the beginning, were like, oh, they're just saying that because they don't want to lose Mordecai or Stone to the transfer portal. But the more and more I've heard along spring has said, no, this is very legit. They have both performed very well in spring, and it's pretty much not quite a coin toss. I'd say probably Mordecai has the edge right now. But Preston is very much pushing Mordecai for that starting job. And why not? He is the #1 overall recruit that SMU has ever been able to pull. They definitely would probably be pushed to start a guy like him in order to be able to be more successful going forward. Josh, what do you think overall of Preston Stone? Regardless of whether he gets a starting job this year, do you think he's worth an investment in Dynasty?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. So, I'm a Miami fan. And so we had Rhett Lashley for a couple of years, and, he came from SMU, and he promised not to try to recruit Preston Stone because of his relationship with dad, and he was super faithful to SMU. I mean, really speaks highly of him. But also Preston Stone's dad is the former student body president at SMU and is highly connected. I want to say he's a booster, but I'm not 100% on that. So there is a little politics here that you just kind of wonder. And Kmart Wheaton came back to play with Stone. Not to plug other publications too much, but Billy Embody he's an SMU beat writer for On3. He is unbelievable at just his analysis and his connections within that program. So he just hits on everything. It's really interesting. He would say for this year, or not this year, but right now, like you said, it's a toss up. There's a little bit more to Mordecai at this point, but man, Stone, what he would say is Stone has this moxie, that the swag that the players respond to. And so the question is, do intangibles, do relationships, do that stuff matter enough? But Preston Stone at some point is going to score 30 plus fantasy points a game. Because although he is a pocket passer, maybe he's a playmaker, and he can make plays with his legs as well. And that's one of the ways that he has a leg up on Mordecai. So I would absolutely, even if he's available in your supplemental draft, you're just going to wait a year because if Mordecai takes over, it means that he's going to break his school passing record from last year of 39 touchdowns, and he's going to go to the league. So I think Preston Stone's really safe to take regardless of whether he starts. But major bonus if he does, because he'll be a top 10 QB, I think.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, like it's the hit rate's very low if you're going for guys that you don't know are starting and you're picking them in a supplemental draft. Preston Stone kind of breaks that because, again, he's going to start for the SMU at one point. They've made it very clear that he is so close to starting if he hasn't gotten the job already. As far as I'm concerned, pick Preston Stone. And, again, you're exactly right, Josh. If he starts this year, that's awesome. If he doesn't, he's probably going to start next year, and you're going to be right back where you were with the starting QB of SMU. Before we go any further, I do want to clarify something real quick, and I should have clarified this earlier. All the people we are talking about today are the rule that we have with this, because a lot of people are probably screaming at you like, I don't want to hear about Myles Price. He's not available in my league. I don't want to hear about Collin Schlee. He's not available in my league. The rule we went with here today was that we are able to capture the rostership percentages at the end of last year after all the championship games have been played, and we are choosing guys that are available in less than 5% of leagues. I felt like that was a pretty good number to say, like, alrighty, even pretty deep dynasty rosters probably don't get into the or like medium deep dynasty rosters probably don't get into those guys who are owned on less than 5% of rosters. So if you're sitting there wondering why we chose these guys and not some other guys who might be kind of low, like you were kind of expecting to see, that is why. Probably should have clarified that earlier, but I'm clarifying it now, and I'm doing a halfway decent job of doing it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jared, because here's the deal. If Preston Stone is available in your supplemental draft, please invite me into your league. Exactly. Because I'd love to be a part of that league.
Again, some of these guys I was shocked by, but some of these guys make sense because, again,
right, for sure.
Some of these guys were kind of late bloomers going into last year, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about our next guy here. And some people, and again, I mentioned this on last week's show, if you're in a supplemental draft, this is probably where you want to grab tight ends. I mentioned Oscar Delp in the future freshman pod, and immediately Mitch kind of pushed back on me saying and Brandon as well, they both kind of pushed back on me hey, if you're in a dynasty league, don't worry about drafting freshman tight ends. You don't want to sit with them for a while. So here's where you're going to get your value in tight ends, and there's no bigger value to me than Mr. Michael Trigg, tight end out of Ole Miss, former 4-star tight end, went to USC, followed Jackson Dart over to Ole Miss, and I have been so excited about this man all season. I kept telling people, I'm like, listen, all the things are lining up here. Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss have had success at the tight end so many times. Harrison Bryant, Kenny Yeboah being the two best ones out of it. If you had applied Harrison Bryant's best season to last year, he would have finished as a tight end too. If you had extrapolated Kenny Yeboah's season where he wasn't injured and extrapolated that to 12 games, he would have been tight end 2 last year. They very clearly love using the tight end over there in that offense. Trigg has the talent. He has the connection with Jackson Dart. It looks like he has the connection with Altmaier as well, from what it sounds like. It doesn't matter who starts there. He's going to be targeted in that red zone every single time. And in addition, no other receiver really has truly stepped up as far as we've been able to see. Jonathan Mingo is the incumbent, but he is injured constantly. Jordan Watkins might be interesting there in the slot. Jalen Robinson just got there to Ole Miss, but we don't know anything about what he's doing yet. To me, the safest value in the Ole Miss offense is Michael Trigg, and he has 4 years of eligibility. That is a ton of potential there. I would adore to be able to get Michael Trigg in any dynasty league if he is available.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're 100% honest. I think you and I have very similar opinions on players, and it's one of those things where I think I've heard you say this in another podcast, but you have Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers going so high.
Yeah.
And Trigg is and then Kuntz next. But Trigg, for a long time, I know we both probably wish that he didn't blow up in that spring game, because I think he was still going in that 9th, 10th round ADP range. 100%. And he's creeping up, but he's still value. And it's don't go after Bowers. Maybe go after Mayer, but probably not. Just wait for Trigg and wait for Kuntz to get picked, and then Trigg will be the next one. And I'm with you.
I'll throw this out here with because I'm actually in the middle of a mock draft right now. Bowers and Neyor still went off in the third. Trigg was actually the third tight end taken off the board in the 6th round. Kuntz was taken off in the 6th round as well. So it looks like Trigg and Kuntz are now that second tier.
Yeah.
I will take both of those guys over Meyer. I had a brain fart there. Excuse me, everybody. I will take both of those guys over Neyor and Bowers every single day. Because again, Michael Trigg Michael Trigg to me is the best value clearly right now. And like I have debated putting him in my top 2 tight ends for this year because I really to me too many things are just lining up for him not to produce.
Yep.
For me, like I'll aggressively go after him in leagues. He's somebody that I'd be willing to, like, if he made it up into the 5th round of ADP, I'd probably still go ahead and grab him there because that's how much I have a ceiling I think he has.
Yeah, and I know we're not talking about best ball or redraft, but like I would say like there's a drop off in that 4th, 5th round because people are adjusting now with wide receivers, running backs, and so go ahead and grab Trigg there versus like if you don't get them in the first 4 rounds or a running back or wide receiver, like you're going to be hurting a little bit. I think later on. So I think Trigg, as far as draft strategy goes, Trigg's a great one. Just target 5th or 6th round. Get him in the 5th round. Be safe. But go ahead.
I would say in Dynasty, if he's there, to me, if we're talking just supplemental guys, are you taking him in the 1st round just to have that positional advantage, Josh?
Yes, I think so. Absolutely, because it's so much volatility, particularly if it's a PPR or even a tight end premium, as more leagues are going to. As I think C2C has influenced things in that way. Mm-hmm. It's like absolutely, I think he's worth taking in that round or in that range if it's purely supplemental.
Alrighty, we'll move on from Michael Trigg here. Let's go ahead and talk about Mr. Byron Cardwell, running back out of Oregon. My running back 31 for this upcoming season in terms of redraft. We're looking at the likely RB1 here, Joshua. Or John, why did I say your full name there? What I am.
Hey, it's great, man. My son would be proud of you.
Your son. Oh yeah, I want to hear this story now.
He just corrects everybody calls me Josh, and so my son's like, his name is Joshua. It's not Josh. His mom named him Joshua. He makes like this big, like he's offended that people would call me.
Adore.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
that is incredible.
It's incredible.
I hope my kids respect me enough one day when like they'll go to bat for me in terms of saying my name. Although there's not really a good way to short Jared, as far as I can tell. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, it's cute at 8. Hopefully he's not doing it at 18, or we'll have to have some conversations about relational intelligence. But
true. But anyway, Josh, talk to me about Byron Cardwell. Guy has 4 years of eligibility, almost at 3. 4 years of eligibility left. Likely the RB1 for Oregon this year. What are you seeing here? What are you super excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy that's going to produce in a system that originated with Mike Norvell back in the day. I think it's Kenny Dillingham's the OC there, yes. But he comes from that Mike Norvell tree. And I think they just had Marquise Irving come in there. And even if there's 2 running backs, we've seen 2 running backs produce at a pretty high level in this offense at Memphis. Good. And Oregon, I think was a top 15, 20 offensive line and advanced line stats, like standard yard lines per play, standard line yards.
Hold on, let me call
per
Chris
play.
Moxley. I'm sure he'll tell us.
Yeah, there you go. It's average standard line yards, but they're a top 20 offensive line. They're really good offensive line. And so I think he's going to produce. He's going to be the RB1 there. And I think you're going to get him for a couple of years. And even if Jordan James comes in and is killing it this year or even up to next year, I think you're going to still see a system that's going to feature at least 2 running backs. And they're going to run it 40, 45 times a game because that's what Dillingham wants to do. He just didn't have the pieces to do it at both Auburn and then at Florida State later. So yeah, I like Cardwell a lot. I mean, I'm drafting him this year to produce this year. So I think if you can get him for 2 years, great. And there's a good chance he could stay for 4 years because I don't think he's got super high upside in a C2C or NFL. Not as anyways. We can not talk about that, but I think he could have 3 years of eligibility left for you. So
Yeah, I don't see him go. I don't see him staying all 4 years, but I could definitely see him like staying for that fourth year after high school and everything like that. And I was going to ask you about like them bringing in all these running backs with Whittingham, not Whittingham, Whittington, Whittington from Western Kentucky, Marquise Irving and everything. If you were worried about maybe that kind of cutting into him a little bit, Jordan James, a very similar kind of back to him, bringing in as a freshman. It sounds like they're excited about him. They were able to keep Cardwell from transferring or anything like that, so it sounds like they want to use him this year. And if he produces this year, I see no reason why you wouldn't expect him to just stay at that producer for the next 2 years.
And we talk a lot about systems, right? And I think it's a great system, and he's a good fit for that system. Like they run a lot of zone. He's a patient runner. He picks a hole and he can go. So I think he's going to fit well with what they want to do. And I think by now we've all heard the stories of the 170-yard scrimmage that he had and all that. And they're giving him the treatment, right, of like the star player, like your boy Isaiah Bowser gets at UCF, right? Where they didn't play him in the spring game because they didn't have to, and they wanted to save him. So I think it's all set up well for them. Everything you want, he's got, and I think he'll produce for a couple years. Now, again, is he going to be top 5 CFF running back? No, but he's going to be solid. So
great safe floor for him, absolutely. Let's talk about our next player here. We're going down to the state of Texas. We got Mr. Isaiah Neyor, wide receiver out of Texas, formerly wide receiver out of Wyoming. Buzz has been going all spring for Neyor. I was a little hesitant at first because, again, I'm a big Worthy guy. I like Worthy quite a bit. And I was like, I don't really know if I really believe about like this idea that Neyor could be a 1B. I thought it was going to be clearly the Worthy show and then Neyor would be the clear number 2. But it sounds like that this is they're going to be a dynamic duo for this offense. Quinn Ewers is a starter. He's going to have a plethora of weapons there. We saw it in the spring game. Neyor can be a burner for this offense. Great deep threat for him. And then we all breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief with Jordan Addison going to USC rather than Texas, because I actually talked to Mitch about this last week, and he actually brought up a good point about how Texas's offense kind of mirrors Ohio State's a little bit, and Ohio State has an ability to produce 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers, so maybe there's a possibility that all 3 of them could have been great at Texas. Even so, we don't have to worry about that anymore, and we don't have to worry about 2 major options here, and I think Neyor and Worthy are definitely above Whittington. Again, we have, Isaiah Neyor has 3 years of eligibility going forward. He doesn't really strike me as a wide receiver that is itching to go to the NFL. Now, granted, he did make that jump from Wyoming to Texas, so very clearly he has some eye on the ball there, thinking like, all right, if I go to Texas, maybe that'll boost my stock there. What do you think overall of Mr. Neyor? Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's such a talented player. I went to the spring game, in person because I'm here in Austin, and man, his size and his speed just pops off, right? He's 6'3", 218, and he's fast. Like he's not Worthy fast. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, and you can imagine, right? Like that defense is terrible, and Quinn Ewers, like, what does he like to do? He likes to push the ball down the field. I think that's what he's known for, showing off that arm. And so, I would. It's really tough for me to figure out what to do with Worthy and Neyor in general. And so there's part of me that goes, man, is Neyor the better value because Worthy goes so high in redraft? And that in turn comes to dynasty, right? Where like, man, like Neyor could have real value in this offense. And so I absolutely think he's an NFL wide receiver. And, I don't know what that means for, his eligibility and how long he'll stay, but he certainly could produce. And if Worthy gets hurt, man, like this guy is going to go bonkers. And Worthy, like there's one play in the spring game, and I'm sure you watched it, but like he has that play on the sidelines where Worthy just gets like blown up. I don't know if you remember, he like went like 15 yards and like safety just pops him. And the kid is like he's 160 pounds. He's not gained weight yet. And it's a little concerning. Yeah. And you just wonder, like how much, like if he gets popped like hard, is he out? And maybe he's super durable and we see, but Neyor definitely has a lot of upside in this offense. And they're going to average 40 points a game because they're going to have to. Exactly. And so it's really interesting. And, and Neyor, just his potential pops off to me.
I'll throw this out there as well. I mean, a lot of probably defensive coordinators haven't really considered the potential of Neyor yet. Probably going to focus therein on Worthy, and they'll probably learn too late that Neyor is, I won't say just as capable receiver, but also a very capable receiver. And with all the focus being put on Worthy, because Worthy kind of showed his hand last year, maybe Neyor takes advantage of that, and they're able to get the ball to him more than Worthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go ahead.
Good point.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on from a guy who has left Wyoming to a guy who is still at Wyoming, one of the few players who actually managed to stay at Wyoming, because another school like Arizona State where it's just a mass exodus. But unlike Arizona State, there is still one man here, one man with the Cowboys that we are investing in for CFF this year, and that is Mr. Titus Swen, running back out of Wyoming. He is my running back 18 for this year. He is the only member we're talking about here today that has only 2 years of eligibility. But Josh, why are we so in on Titus Swen, even though he has probably the least number of years of eligibility here? And we're, like, again, we just mentioned this is a program we don't particularly love anybody else in. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll run off some stats here of the last 7 years of running backs, right? Yeah, Brian Hill, 1,631 yards. Next year, 1,860 yards. And we'll skip a year. It's Collin Overstreet. He had 481. But then we go back with Nico Evans, 1,300 yards. Valaday, 1,200 yards. And then you had 1,000 yards last season. So we're going to leave out COVID because they played 4 games or so. Yeah. But this is a system, right? Again, that just produces. And and I think Mitch made a great point. If you're not watching Wyoming, you might not have known this. But Mitch talked about this in the Future Freshman podcast. But man, Swen really took over in that last
he did.
Half of the year. And he really made it more of an RBBC there. And so this kid, he tore his ACL a couple years ago, so he had to recover. But he's fully recovered and he's got that speed back, and he was a talented back coming out of high school. So this is a kid that I think is absolutely going to produce at a high level. He's more talented than Valaday. Oh, yeah. And and like you said, he's RB 18 in your rankings, and I think that's absolutely valid. And he's gonna, as long as he understands who he is, he'll stay for 2 years. Yep. And you'll have him for 2 more years. And so I think that's great value here. 2 years of a running back that's going to get you 20 points a game. And if you're still rebuilding, and after the year, you can trade him off for a first-round pick next year and start over again. So.
Exactly. And you mentioned just that Wyoming running back has just been historically great for CFF, especially this last 10 years. And why not? They have one of the largest rushing shares in terms of their neutral pass rate. They only, in a neutral passing situation, they only pass 30.7 times, or 30.7% of the time. So that means 7 out of 10 plays in a game that is even score 0-0, they're going to be running the ball. And Titus Swen is by far the most talented player. They are going to be giving him the ball as much as they can. This is a pure volume play. I'm not sold on the idea that Wyoming is going to score a ton this year, but it may not matter because Swen is just going to be given the ball so many times this year. I would love to be able to just draft Titus Swen for 2 years, start him in my lineup every year, get my 20 points a week, 15, 20 points week in and week out, and just don't worry about it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
All right, let's go back to quarterbacks. We haven't talked about quarterbacks here in a while, and we're going to stick in the Mountain West, though. We're going to talk about Clay Millen, quarterback for Colorado State. To me, the big selling point here is that he is just the heir apparent to Carson Strong in the Jay Norvell offense. That entire offense was just picked up, dropped over from Nevada to Colorado State because Colorado State actually wanted to pay their head coach, unlike Nevada. And again, like Millen doesn't have a ton of stats to go off of. He threw 2 times last year because Carson Strong was just out there constantly. But we've known for a while that he was going to be the next guy for Norvell once Carson Strong has left. There's been nothing out of spring camp to kind of counter that. It sounds like Clay Millen is easily the guy. And they have a ton of great weapons for him to work with this year. You got Dante Wright left over from the previous regime. A lot of people like him. But Torrey Horton and Melquan Stovall both coming over from Nevada. I think those guys are huge values right now. I'd much rather grab them over Dante Wright. There's one more I can't remember off the top of my head. It's another wide receiver that I liked at Colorado. I don't know. I'll probably remember him later. But even still, like
Gary Williams, even though he's a tight end.
I would say the tight ends, Gary Williams, and there's another one that I forget him off the top of my head. I remember a beat writer there said that he's actually the starting tight end, not Gary Williams. Good Lord, I'm a terrible host. I should be bringing this information
in the comments later.
I'll put it in the comments or I'll put a tweet out later. And then in addition, they got some receiving backs there as well. Vivens was listed as the starting tight end in that same article because they think that he's just a better fit for this overall system. David Bailey isn't really a guy that you expect to catch out of the backfield a ton. Vivens seems more like that kind of guy. They got so many weapons for Clay Millen to work with here. He's my QB 28 for this year. I think that he's being severely underdrafted right now. If you loved Carson Strong last year, there's no reason not to take Clay Millen and expect really 4 years of production because we just saw Carson Strong go undrafted. I think Clay Millen realizes that this system isn't built for the NFL to fall in love with you. So if he's a starter now, 4 years of a CFF starter, I'll take that any day.
Yeah, Clay Millen was one of those guys. I mean, 6'3", 200. He's one of those guys that got lost in the COVID shuffle, right? Like where like teams really didn't get it to get out and evaluate, but his numbers that he put up, and he's from Washington, the numbers he put up out there were absolutely insane his senior year. I think he had like 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, which is a good, like, you want to get that kind of 10-to-1 ratio touchdown to interception with a quarterback for success in college. And he's got that. And he was a 91. He was a 4-star according to 247, like coming into college. You don't get those in the Mountain West Conference, right? You don't get those in this system. And so you're right. He's just such a talented guy that, like, you know, almost as long as, you know, the practice reports and spring reports are coming back as like he's doing well and he's checking off boxes, like you're simply checking in because you know this kid has talent. And like Torrey Horton is an absolute beast. Like Dante Wright is a floor for like what they're capable of there at Colorado State. But Melquan Stovall is a beast as well. So he's going to have weapons to throw to, like you said. You know, I think it's a plug and play and pretty easy to say, man, Clay Millen, you're going to have him for 3 years and he's averaged probably 26 to 30 points a game for he's going to be a solid starter.
Oh, very much so. Again, I would draft him and just not even really look back that much. Again, is the ceiling capped a little bit because he's a pocket passer rather than a dual threat quarterback? Yeah, of course. But again, like sometimes in a dynasty league, especially if you're in a struggling team like mine, you're just looking for anybody that you can grab, that you can plug in and guarantee yourself 20, 25 points, if not 25, 30 points every single week.
Right.
So let's talk about another quarterback here. We're going back to the AAC, and we're going to talk about a dual threat quarterback now, finally. We're going to talk about Mr. Evan Prater. Josh, I haven't let you start in a while, so I'm going to let you start on here. Why are we excited about Evan Prater, quarterback out of Cincinnati?
Yeah, well, this kid was, you know, he was the number 6 dual threat coming out according to 247 in 2020. And so he's a guy that's been waiting in the wings behind Desmond Ridder. And so he was extremely raw coming out as a huge basketball talent, Mr. Ohio there in Ohio back in the day. So he's got like kind of as far as like tools go, 6'4", 200, he's got everything you want in a college quarterback. Now, here's the deal. Like he might not start this year. There's a possibility because they brought Ben Bryant back and it's been a close competition. I will say the beat writers for 247 for the Bearcat Journal, they said, man, it was going back and forth in practices between the two. but they feel like Evan Prater over the last week of spring ball, like actually took a step forward in that competition. So I would say, according to the 247 guys, which I trust them, that like that Evan Prater's got a slight lead in that competition. And if he beats out, Ben Bryant, then like Ben Bryant's a good quarterback. It shows that he's got a good floor. So to me, and he's the type of guy that, he's a playmaker and he's going to run for 50 to 100 yards a game. He's a better runner than Desmond Ridder.
This is a guy that I think you can pencil him in for 600-700 yards rushing on the season probably. Yeah.
So he'll be fun to watch, and I think he's a type that could absolutely outproduce his ADP. And you're still going to get another couple years because he's not. He's got tools, right? But like he's not going to the NFL next year. No, like he's another 2 or 3 years down the road. And he loves being at Cincinnati, and he's not transferring out. So it's exciting to watch. What do you think about him?
I was a little concerned about them bringing Ben Bryant back at first, but again, it seems like once the spring game came around, once that last week of practice came in, it really did look like that Prater is just starting to separate himself, which is good news to everybody because, again, he is the highest rated recruit for Cincinnati of all time. You love to see them actually take advantage of the fact of this opportunity they get from these blue chip recruits. So very excited to see what he can do. If Ridder was able to be QB 12 last year with his rushing ability and everything, Prater, to me, at least in a raw sense, is a more talented quarterback. Again, Ridder definitely developed over his last couple of years into a third-round quarterback for the NFL. I think Prater can absolutely take advantage of that same system to be a very good producer for CFF going forward. And again, he's at Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a program that is trying to separate itself from the rest of the AAC right now. They are going to body bag most of the teams that they play every single week. So you're going to expect a lot of scoring out of them. And so Evan Prater is in a very good position there as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and hit up our second to last guy here. We talked earlier about like some of these guys are just people that were kind of under the radar last year, just weren't owned on a lot of rosters. Some of these guys come from FCS. We got somebody coming here from JUCO. We got Mr. Tye Edwards, running back out of UTSA, or he was out of JUCO, going to UTSA now. All signs to me point to Edwards being the next UTSA running back. I have heard from you, Josh. I have heard from Mitch. He's got some close ties down there at UTSA. I've heard from the beat writers. Everybody's kind of pointing at Edwards and saying like, hey, this is that dude for us going into this year. And last year, Cincy McCormick was able to be the RB21. I do wonder what this UTSA team's going to look like this year. They're kind of riding off the high from last year. What do you think overall, Josh, of Tye Edwards? You got to watch him in person a little bit, or at least meet him in person and everything. What do you think overall of him?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I have a long history with Tye Edwards because I loved him when he was coming out of high school back in like 2018, I think, 2019, when he was supposed to go to FAU. So he was a big linebacker recruit back in the day. He was like an 86 rating on 247. He was recruited by a lot of Florida schools to play linebacker, but FAU was going to take him as a running back. And then he had to go Georgia Military Institute or something like that. Gotcha. Then with the JUCO route. So, man, I've watched this guy play for a long time, and the speed size combo is just tantalizing, right? Like it's fun to watch. And the other thing is like right now, like UTSA has been decimated by injury in that backfield. He's kind of like the last man standing in a lot of ways, but he's also like probably the most talented. I think for them, there is a guy that they got at the last minute on signing day as a kind of like out of nowhere, but they've been pleasantly surprised. I'm like, man, like this dude's like legit. So I think, Tye Edwards, I think he can absolutely produce. And like you said, like Sincere McCormick was RB22. And like, I think the year before it was like 1,400 yards rushing, had 1,400 yards rushing again last year, 20 points a game. I mean, it's just a system that produces, right? Exactly. And so this is what we want. And so it's Tye Edwards. I would have been concerned if D'Anthony Lewis, who was a true freshman last year, if he didn't tear up his knee, I would have been concerned about that. But right now, I mean, Brendan Brady's coming back, but he's not anything. So I just think like, unless they're going to bring in some some recruit that we don't know about
Yeah.
that's hit the transfer portal. Like, I think Tye Edwards has a pretty safe job here, and it's a job that produces. So,
and I think people do need to start paying attention a little bit more to these JUCO guys, because like you would be surprised the talent that can come out of JUCO with some of these guys, because again, they go to, especially running backs, because they go to JUCOs, they get heavy loads there, they get used to that kind of workload, and then especially if they come to kind of smaller schools like this, absolutely keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. I'm gonna plug A-Star here, A-Star_FF on Twitter. He constantly is putting out threads out there about JUCO guys that you should keep your eye on. I pretty much write down almost every single one of them, see if I can find a way to add them into my rankings and such. Because again, there's some pretty interesting names that can come out of JUCO every year. So absolutely check that out.
Yeah, that's good.
I like Tye Edwards. I got him as my running back 26 for this upcoming year. I'm probably drafting him higher than pretty much everybody else. I know I got him in the 8th round of this most recent mock that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were Mitch kind of pointed out very quickly, he's like, wow, that value is kind of rising, isn't it? And I'm like, well, he deserves it. As far as I can tell, he is the guy for UTSA. He's got 3 years of eligibility going forward. I will take that for 3 years because, again, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's itching to go to the NFL.
Right. And there's a no man's land there.
Oh, yeah.
And running backs. And so it's like, man, like, why not go? Everybody's just drafting their guy at that point anyways. So Go get your guy, man.
Alrighty. Speaking of your guys, I am very interested to hear this last one because we got Mr. Antario Brown, running back out of Northern Illinois, former 3-star recruit. I remember a lot of people being on him last year to be able to take over the Northern Illinois job. Very much was able to get some work in last year, especially with Harrison Whaley going down to injury, and now Javon Ducker has transferred away to Memphis. Josh, you are probably the highest person I have seen out of anybody in the CFF circle on Antario Brown, so I really want to hear your selling point on this man. And I specifically want to hear, like, what about Harrison Whaley? Because he's coming back from injury.
Yeah.
And how do you kind of juggle those two, and why you think Antario Brown is good enough to where he is a top 12 guy to grab in supplemental drafts this year?
Yeah. And let me just say this right away. Like, there's a certain point for me where I'm irrational with some of my guys. I just want them, right? Oh, yeah. So I'm gonna draft Antario Brown in the 5th round. I think Harrison Whaley is probably a better value in like a redraft best ball right now because he's going after him. And we can talk about that here in a minute. And I was not expecting Whaley to get up to 200 pounds, and he's gotten up to 200 pounds. And so that's a little bit more of a workload that he can take. But Antario Brown is 5'10", 226 pounds. And you just don't see those running backs. And he ran 11.06 in the 100 meter as a sophomore in high school. That translates to about a 4.5-ish 40. And you watch that breakaway speed. Even last year, we had, I think, 4 35-plus yard runs. I mean, this isn't a guy, he's not just a bruiser. But one of the things that happened with NIU is they ran, I think, 45 times a game last year. Had 3 running backs that they were going with. And Clint Rakovich, who was kind of their 3rd guy, he was the goal line back, and he was a bigger dude, and he had, I think, 12, 13 touchdowns on the year. And between Whaley and Antario Brown, who's gonna get those touchdowns? And I think that's going to be Brown. And so I think there's a nice floor there with him in that way. I think you're going to have him at least for 2 more years after this. I mean, because NIU, unless he transfers out and goes somewhere else, but I think he loves Thomas Hammock and that staff. And so Antario Brown, man, like a guy that I can have 20 points a game with upside of more if somebody gets hurt. Like, he's a guy that, and man, he's just, you don't see like these high 3 stars going to the MAC. Oh yeah. And he's a guy that at one point was like an 89, 247 rating. And so that's just a really high rating for a guy. Again, size speed combo at that level. We already talked about Max, a cheat code. Yeah. So I love Antario Brown. I think if you can get Whaley too, I think both of them are going to average an absurd amount. They were the 5th best rushing team in the nation last year. Yep. And it was them in North Texas that weren't triple option teams. So Like they're just a rare breed in what they could do. And I'm not sold on Rocky Lombardi. And I think they're just going to run the ball because they don't have to do anything else. And so for me, Antario Brown is a guy that, look, people could argue with him all day and they would probably win the argument of like, should you draft him in the 5th round of a best ball redraft? Yeah, you probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. And here we are. And I'll live and die with my guys. And in Dynasty too, because the guy is going to have value for the next couple of years. I would absolutely take him and just see what happens to him because the upside is ridiculous.
Yeah, you pretty much touched on everything I was going to kind of bring up where it's like, again, this is one of the best rushing teams in the nation. It is a system that could produce 2 CFF running backs. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So, like, we could be looking at both Brown and Whaley having a great year next year. So I don't think there's maybe too much to argue about there. Again, you're right that Whaley is going after Brown. Whaley is going as RB56, while Brown is going on average as the RB40. So there's several rounds of ADP difference going on there. But if you're looking at this from Dynasty perspective, Brown, higher recruiting pedigree, has more years of eligibility. Whaley only has 3. Brown has 4. And then you kind of touched on it a little bit. This is something I guess we can talk about a little bit more here. If you have these super talented guys at smaller schools, there is a possibility they could transfer to a different opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That can be good sometimes. That can certainly be bad sometimes. But why not go after a guy who is obviously already producing well at the situation he's at? If he goes to a school, especially if it's like a Power 5 school that runs the ball a ton, you're going to love having it owned. And I think that's a better reality, or more likely reality for a guy like Antario Brown, where again, he has the talent backing him, than a guy like Harrison Whaley, who is, I don't want to say another just run-of-the-mill Mac back, because he's a good running back, but like I think Antario Brown is the more likely guy to realize like, hey, I have better opportunities elsewhere. But like you said, he does love the coaching staff here, so maybe that's not the exact situation going on here. But again, that's a possibility with some of these guys.
What's interesting too with NIU, because I've just gotten obsessed with them as I've gotten obsessed with Antario Brown, but their ability to recruit running backs is pretty insane. I mean, if you hit on Whaley, Ducker, right, who's going over at Memphis, and we all like him there. And then you got Antario Brown. They got a kid coming in this year named Jaden Creedle, who his brother's the Georgia State wide receiver, former UCF. Name? Dude, he is unbelievable, and he's another high 3-star from Georgia. Like they're just finding these guys in Georgia.
You're making me fall in love with him already, because again, I know the kind of backs that we produce here in Georgia. And if they're 3 stars in Georgia, they're likely 4 stars in most other states.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm a Florida guy. I'm from Florida originally, so it's the same thing, right? It's like you just have to like not give them a notch up in the recruiting. And so go watch Jaden Creedle. He's small. He's a little bit small. He's like 200 pounds, maybe like 190. But man, that kid is fun to watch. And you just go like, why did this kid end up at NIU? But he's going to take him 3 years to get to the field. So I don't know what you do with that in Dynasty, but I'll be picking him in rounds 14, 15, because nobody else will. And we'll just see if there's some injuries and he can get on the field. But anyways, yeah, NIU, man, like they evaluate talent. My point is they evaluate talent well at the running back position. Sure. And so I think it's one of those things that's like, man, you can trust the system in that way, and the coaching staff and their ability to evaluate talent and go like, man, this is a kid that's just talented. And maybe he sticks at NIU, and maybe he goes to a P5 job because he wants to go to the pros. But we'll see.
Alrighty, that is some incredible conversations you had here today, Josh. I'm going to run through the 12 guys we kind of talked about here today. And if you guys want to reach out to us both later, like we have so many other guys that we debated back and forth of including onto this list. Unfortunately, we don't have time to really kind of dive into any of those guys right now. But I'll do a quick recap of some of these better players. And I really hope more than anything else, we covered a lot of different kind of guys that you can expect to find in your CFF Supplemental Dynasty drafts, so that even if like you're not missing some of the guys we talk about here, a lot of the stuff we talked about can be applied to other people you're looking at in your drafts. And that's really the best way to become good at CFF Redraft and CFF Dynasty, is just learning how to identify types of guys rather than just individual players sometimes. Because again, I mentioned before, CFF at the end of the day, CFF at the end of the day is system. You want to identify guys that are going to work in these systems, and so, or just work in these different types of situations. So we'll go through it real quick. First one we had was Cameron Ward, Washington State quarterback. We had Myles Price, wide receiver out of Texas Tech. We had Collin Schlee, quarterback out of Kent State. We had Preston Stone, quarterback out of SMU. We had Michael Trigg, tight end out of Ole Miss. We had Byron Cardwell, running back out of Oregon. We had Isaiah Neyor, wide receiver out of Texas. We had Titus Swen, running back out of Wyoming. Clay Millen, Clay Millen, quarterback out of Colorado State. Evan Prater, quarterback out of Cincinnati. And then, Tye Edwards, running back out of UTSA. And then finally, running back out of Northern Illinois, Antario Brown. So that pretty much brings us to the end of our show. Josh, I really appreciate you coming on here, man. It has been way too long in terms of me just being able to get you on here. And so with that being said, let everybody know what it is that you're working on. Where can they find you at? What can they kind of expect as the offseason kind of goes along? Or maybe what they can expect once they get into the season?
Yeah. Thanks again for having me on, Jared, man. It's so much fun getting to chop it up with you. And I mean, I just like talking ball. So, and I think even like this conversation, right? Like even if these guys aren't involved in your supplemental draft or whatever, like this is a great redraft best ball conversation for guys that you can get in middle rounds or like replacement players because they're in that 5% ownership.
Exactly.
And so I think that it can help in that way as well. So I'm with Fantasy Points, man. I do CFF stuff over there. And we are actually starting a new CFB package that's going to involve like betting and
Very
player
nice.
props, DFS, which I've been doing over the last. That's really what I do in this industry is more kind of cash single entry DFS lineups and kind of writing on that stuff. But then we're going to get into some CFF player rankings and preseason content, some waiver wire stuff, kind of traditional stuff in that way. And then also we have a great staff over there that loves Devi. We have even some like we partner with C2C on some stuff as well. And so we'll have some of their guys writing for us. And so should be fun. And we'll break that package out in June. And so look for more coming on that. And you can follow me and I'll be tweeting about that. So at CFF guys.
I'm like, if you don't remember, he is at CFF guys. I am at CFF_Jared. Once again, I'm not going to go through the whole spiel again, but if you're watching on YouTube, you guys know what to do. If you're listening on podcast, you guys know what to do. And again, Josh, really appreciate you coming on here and everything. Again, very excited about what we're going to be able to provide you guys going forward and everything. Again, topics are going to vary week by week. And so if you have any ideas of things you want us to cover, maybe it's like, I know I've gotten a couple of requests for draft strategies going forward. And so like I have a couple of guests lined up that maybe would want to talk about different draft strategies. Talked about an idea of like comparing best ball to the redraft ADP because Mike Bainbridge and them have been doing a great job getting the best ball ADP. We've been doing redraft ADP over here, so I'd love to be able to compare and contrast those two, find out where you can get your values in either one of those formats. Great stuff all around. But like I said, we want to hear from you guys on what you want us to talk about. So don't be afraid to hit me up in the DMs on Twitter. It's probably the best way to reach me. And if I ever just don't respond to you for some reason, just give me a little bump, y'all. I do my best to try to respond to everybody. Every once in a while, I do come across like a message from somebody that I like didn't respond to, and it was like 2 weeks later. I'm like, oh, they must have thought I forgot about them. I didn't forget about you. I'm sorry. Even so, appreciate you coming on, Josh. Everybody else, I hope you have a wonderful and safe day. Have a blessed one.